Hey everybody, it's Tyler Austin from Midgard Strength and Conditioning. Thank you so much for watching. So in this video, I want to give you a quick and dirty guide into buying a lifting belt. This is primarily going to be focused for people looking to buy their first belt. However, even if you're looking for your 10th belt, a lot of these points are still going to apply. Now, a lifting belt is a very valuable piece of personal equipment that you will use in the gym. I highly recommend that you buy and use one. I certainly recommend it to all of my clients because ultimately they help you achieve your strength training goals, which is a good thing. However, there are a lot of belts out there on the market, and unfortunately, a lot of them are not good. However, there are a lot of good companies out there making good quality belts, and this video is going to go over what you should look for in a belt, particularly for a first belt. Now, let me just go ahead and just throw this out there immediately. No matter what belt you get, whether it's a 3-inch belt or a 4-inch belt, I'll talk about what width you should look at in a minute here. But no matter what belt you get, it needs to be a belt that is the same width all the way around the belt. So do not get a belt that is one of those like bodybuilder type belts that are really fat in the back and they taper down and get narrow in the front. Those are absolutely pointless and useless, and they are made and sold by people who do not understand how a belt works. The value of a belt comes from how it compresses your abdominal wall and it gives a resistance for your abs to push against when you lift. So a belt that is wide in the back and narrow in the front defeats the purpose of a belt. So those are useless and again are just made by people who do not understand what the purpose of a belt or how a belt works. So yeah, avoid those belts. So make sure you buy a belt that is the same width all the way around. That is very, very, very important, if not the most important thing, really. So diving back onto width here, generally speaking, there are going to be some specialty belts that are a little bit different widths, but we're not talking about those. But generally speaking, there are two widths of belts. There are 4-inch belts, and then there are 3-inch belts. Now, as a general rule, especially for your first belt, I would recommend that you get a 3-inch belt. Unless you are really tall and or really long torsoed, a 3-inch belt is going to be a better general purpose belt for you than a 4-inch belt. Why? Because a 4-inch belt for a lot of people, especially if you tend to be a little bit shorter or shorter torsoed, a 4-inch belt might be a little too wide for you to use on particular lifts, particularly like the deadlift or the squat, especially the deadlift. It might be too wide, it might be too uncomfortable for you to get into the bottom of a deadlift position or even the bottom of a squat because it's just too wide. A 3-inch belt, even for someone like me who is really short, I'm 5'3" and I'm actually pretty short torso too. A 3-inch belt is not too wide. I can use it for all my lifts comfortably. So a 3-inch belt is wide enough to actually do the job and provide support. But at the same time, it's narrow enough where it doesn't interfere in any of your lifts. It's not going to cause any problems in any bottom positions, particularly in the deadlift and the squat. So it makes for a better general purpose belt for most people. Now, again, if you're like 6'4", and especially if you're 6'4" and really long torso, you can definitely get away with a 4-inch belt. But for most people of average height and average size, a 3-inch belt is going to make for a better general purpose belt. And by general purpose, I mean a belt that you can use for literally everything, like squats, deadlifts, overhead presses, benches, and anything else, right? It's just a good general purpose belt. Moving on from there, width. There are several widths of belts out there on the market. Generally speaking, the three main ones are going to be a 7mm single ply belt, 10mm belts, and then 13mm double ply belts. Now, before I dive more into that, you should always buy a belt that is either leather or suede. Don't get any other material. Good quality belts are made from leather or suede. Especially avoid Velcro belts. Unless you are buying a Velcro belt that you're going to use only and specifically for Olympic weightlifting, Velcro belts are horrible because they are neither thick enough generally to provide any good support, but worst of all, that Velcro, especially after you've used it quite a bit, has a tendency to want to unravel on you in the middle of a lift. And I can assure you, having a belt unravel on you while you're halfway up a deadlift or coming out of the bottom of a squat is not an experience you want to have happen to you. It's a very, very unpleasant experience and one that you want to avoid, and you can avoid that by not using Velcro belts. So avoid Velcro belts unless you are using it, again, specifically for Olympic weightlifting. And the only reason why people like to use Velcro belts for Olympic weightlifting is that there's no buckle to get in the way of like a clean or a snatch or whatever, okay? So avoid Velcro belts. So like I said, good belts are made from either just a solid piece of leather or two pieces of leather sewn together or or suede, okay? So always look for a belt made of that material. Now, going back to width, like I said, you have 7mm belts, which is generally speaking going to be just one solid piece of leather. Then you're going to have 10mm belts, which a lot of the 10mm belts are going to be suede belts. They tend to be just a little bit thicker. And then you have 13mm double ply belts, which is two pieces of leather sewn together, and those are really, really fat belts. Now, for your first belt, I highly recommend that you get either a 7mm just single ply belt, or if you want to go the suede route, get a 10mm suede belt. The reason for this is because the thicker the belt is generally, the more uncomfortable it is going to be to use. Now, a super heavyweight power lifter, competitive power lifter, might prefer to use like a 13mm fat belt because he's willing to deal with the little bit of extra discomfort so he can lift more weight and win a competition. However, for a general purpose belt, for general strength and conditioning purposes, you do not need that thick of a belt. A 7mm single ply belt, which both of these belts are just 7mm single ply belts, or a 10mm suede belt is going to be more than stiff enough to do the job. Certainly anything that you're going to use it for. So that's what I would recommend. They're thick enough to do the job. However, they're thin enough to where they won't be terribly uncomfortable to use, especially for your first belt. So those are the two thicknesses I would recommend for a first belt. Moving on to some more of minutia here. For any belt, whether it's your first belt or otherwise, always get a single pronged belt, which a single prong is just a prong that you use to stick into the hole to secure the belt. There are two types. There are generally single prong belts and double prong belts. You only need a single prong belt. Do not get double prong belts. A single prong is more than strong enough to withhold any work you're going to put it through, I can assure you. And there's no advantage to a double prong belt. In fact, they're just the only thing they bring to the table is just being more obnoxious to use, because instead of having one prong that you need to stick in one hole while you're trying to tighten the belt, now you have two prongs that you're trying to stick in two holes while you're trying to tighten the belt. They're just obnoxious to use. Avoid them. Do not get a double prong belt. Get a single prong belt. They're just easier to use, and they're more than strong enough to hold up to, again, anything you are going to put it through. And then finally, one other thing I would highly suggest you look for is for the roller, go with what is known as a solid piece roller. This is a roller that does not have a seam in the middle. And what this does is it makes it, number one, a little bit easier to tighten up because there's no split in the middle of that roller that the belt has to like roll over. But the biggest reason is because if you have a split in the roller, which this isn't something this isn't necessarily like a deal breaker, but it's definitely something to look for in And generally speaking, any good high quality belt, certainly the companies I'm going to recommend at the end of this video, are going to have solid rollers. But for example, this is the first belt I ever bought. This is just a very basic single ply belt I got off Elite FTS many years ago when I first started training. This one has a split roller on it. Now again, this isn't necessarily a deal breaker, but it does make it a little harder to tighten up because again, getting over that roller, especially when you're at the end stages of tightening, can sometimes be a little bit of annoying. But the biggest problem with these is just long-term durability, because what ends up happening is over time that split will have a tendency to want to open up, and eventually the roller might even fall off the buckle, and at that point the belt is going to be kind of useless, or it's going to be very hard to use because it's going to be very hard to tighten the belt without that roller. So the biggest problem with these is just going to be long-term durability. Again, it's not necessarily a deal breaker, but that will probably end up being the weak point of the belt. Okay, so it's something to look out for. Look for single solid piece rollers rather than split rollers. Again, most companies that build really good quality belts are going to use that solid roller. So those are the main points that I would recommend that you look for when buying a belt, particularly a first belt. Now, I know some of you are just going, stop flapping your gums, just tell us where to go to buy a belt. There are two companies I recommend wholeheartedly when it comes to belts. The first one is going to be Pioneer Belts or Pioneer Fitness. They make absolutely phenomenal belts. I can't recommend them enough. Any belt you get from them is going to be a very high quality belt, and it will last you, assuming you take care of it, it will last you a lifetime. You could probably hand it down to your kids. The second company I would highly recommend is Dominion Strength. They also make really high quality, phenomenal belts too. Again, belts that will last you a lifetime, assuming you take care of it, and you could probably pass down to your kids. Any good belt will last you a very long time, if not your lifetime. Again, assuming, because it's leather, that you take care of it properly. So those are the two companies that I recommend. Pioneer Fitness or Pioneer Belts. If you just type in Google Pioneer Belts, it will show up. Or Dominion Strength Belts. Both of those companies I have personal experience with. This is a Pioneer belt right here. Absolutely love this belt. And I've had many clients get Pioneer belts, and they all love them. And I've also have personal experience with Dominion belts, and I have many clients who have gotten Dominion belts, and they're also very high quality belts that you will not go wrong with if you buy one. So those are the two companies that I recommend wholeheartedly for belts. So I hope you found this video helpful and informative. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for watching. I hope you found this video helpful, informative, and entertaining. If you did, be sure to like, subscribe, or follow depending on where you're watching this. You can follow me on Instagram at Tyler_MidgardStrength, and I am also on Zion. My two community pages are Midgard Strength and Conditioning and Gungnir Strategic. You can scan their respective codes here or search for them on the community search page. If you like my strength and conditioning content, check out my podcast, the Classical Strength Podcast, available on all major podcast platforms. Finally, if you would like to become stronger and healthier than you've ever been in your life, consider hiring me as your coach. I offer the most effective and personalized online coaching in the industry. So if that's something that would interest you, visit my website, MidgardStrength.com, or you can email me directly at Tyler@MidgardStrength.com. Thanks for watching.